I promise this is not a video about me hating on avocado toast or lemon water or generally self-improvement stuff. Like clockwork, every year, YouTube is flooded with a stream of videos where you can finally learn how to fix your life in 365 days, ranging from the academic sphere to corporate to finally landing your dream body. There's no shortage of self-improvement tips, especially in January. As someone who's pretty passionate about self-help stuff and a good motivational quote here and there, I feel like a lot of this advice is starting to ring hollow. And as a disclaimer before I get into the main argument of the video, this is not attacking the ideology of one specific video or even one specific person, but rather a criticism of the general outlook and aesthetic they tend to cultivate. And it's specifically going to be about self-improvement slash lifestyle advice by women for young women, because I can't say I know anything about the male self-improvement circle online. And if you saw the thumbnail of this video, I think you'll kind of get the vibe that I'm going for. And these kind of videos and creators come in like a wide spectrum, some of which I have like mild disagreements with, but I can see their general value, all the way to those that I like fundamentally disagree with. But for the sake of this argument, I'm going to be addressing the more milder side, where it's not always the advice I have a problem with, because a lot of it is, pretty solid advice for anyone, but rather the way it's packaged and turned into an aesthetic rather than a series of daily choices. And I guess that's kind of a problem with social media in general. I think my main problem is that I feel like it's trying to sell you something based on this shiny cover with little understanding of the substance inside. And let's be honest, a lot of these like girl self-improvement stuff is just the same thing, but like with a different format, from like that girl to it girl to Pilates princess to clean girl. Again, this is just an extension of a larger problem with social media being so focused on how something looks rather than it being genuine. For example, do you like reading, or do you just like the reading aesthetic? And here's my main problem with the way these videos are packaged. You barely get a chance to consider if you actually want what the video lays out. Do you want this lifestyle, or do you just want the appearance of it? And what happens when the aesthetic and lifestyle gets boring? Are you going to drop all the objectively good habits you acquired because you've lost the motivation and any discipline you've built because you relied on this persona someone else crafted for you? Not everyone else is going to be their happiest with the same clean girl aesthetic. And with concepts like vision boards, while it can serve as motivation, it can completely idolize and romanticize your dream self to the point of you have no concrete steps on how to get there. For me, part of the reason why it's hard to commit to long-term visions is because, one, it seems so far away, I don't have to do anything, or it's so far away, I don't even know where to start. And a lot of times, imagining your dream self just constantly reinforces the gap between your current self and your dream self. And just imagining it doesn't make you any more deserving of it. And a lot of times, vision boards can feel overly materialistic and appearance focused. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to like want to look good and have certain things, but it kind of replaces the joy of what got you there in the first place. For example, being a good student theoretically comes from the process of actually enjoying learning and expanding your knowledge, not just really liking the academia aesthetic. And with a lot of these like Pinterest vision board photos, it's just like beautiful women standing in front of a desirable thing. Like, is that her sports card? I don't know, but she's certainly standing in front of it. This is just a reminder to take everything with a grain of salt. Just don't believe something someone's preaching just because they look good doing it or they have the thing that you want. On a broader scale, I generally feel like things are simplified way too much when it comes to hard work, motivation, and relationships with other people. Dumbing down people you criticize or dislike into just obsessed haters with no life of their own is kind of an extension of inflated self-worth. This like overly positive nothing gets to me because I'm too pretty to deal with it really doesn't set strong foundations for your confidence or motivation in the long term. Even saying it sounds like a facade. It feels like almost like neo-stoicism, well, at least with the level of detachment exhibited. Like the classic criticism of stoicism, if you shield yourself from emotion all the time, you hinder your ability to feel. And maybe it's just me speaking as a writer, but I'd rather live fully and feel the intensity of something rather than feeling like I always have one foot out the door ready to bolt. And I'm not saying all the self-improvement girlies are preaching Stoic philosophy, but rather like a certain coloration of life that takes you back from the reality of situation and what you really want. Maybe it works for some people, but I can't just stand in a mirror and tell myself I'm the greatest, I'm so confident, I don't care what anyone else thinks of me because I have that individual confidence. But no one is truly an island, and romanticizing individual perfection kind of divorces you from the world around you and the fact that it does shape who you are and how you feel about yourself. Personally, I don't think being self-obsessed is the way to happiness and long-lasting self-improvement. And at worst, it can be an easy gateway to self-hatred because they're so close in how much your personhood occupies your mind. Personally, like, I'm usually the happiest when I think the least of myself and what I feel like I deserve, and I can elaborate on that later. So here's where I have a clear bias that I'm gonna admit straightforward. I don't necessarily believe that everyone deserves love inherently beyond, like, your family and your parents. Despite the common sentiment on social media, I don't know if people inherently deserve love from their friends and romance and stuff just because they exist, because I keep thinking, like, who deserves to give it to you? Who deserves to love you? And to be clear, this is different from saying someone is or is not lovable. I just personally think that the fact you're born doesn't inherently grant you the right to this, because it is a two-way street. Not that I think you deserve to be loved is a bad thought, and I guess it can be comforting, but it can also breed the idea that it is something always inevitable and you will receive it even when you're passive, and also creates this illusion of, if I deserve something and if I desire it, why haven't I gotten it? And not to sound like I'm rediscovering Buddhism, with desire being at the root of all suffering, but I'm saying regardless of whether or not you desire something, if you think you're inherently deserving of it, it just makes you unnecessarily upset that you don't get it at the timeline you want. And this may not be the direct intent, but I feel like the attitude cultivated when talking about relationships with other people makes it seem like it's just a commodity. Like, if this isn't serving your life 100% of the time, get rid of it because there's always going to be something better on the horizon. There's such a focus on me, getting all the time. What can I get from this person? To the point it feels like you don't even want another person. You just want someone to make you feel a certain type of way. And if it's not met, you'll move on without stopping to consider there's two sides of a story. Part of the reason why self-help is such a big industry is because obviously reading and listening to self-help is not going to change your life. After consuming some content, the next natural step is to create a perfect glow-up plan with a beautiful Notion page or bullet journal, whatever you want. It just has to be perfect. And only when it's perfect can you start. And also make sure you're always perfect, because if you mess up, just throw in the towel, wait for something else to come along and motivate you and push you to change, and then the cycle repeats. And after a while, this image of perfection can seem so incredibly unrelatable that it feels out of reach and not even worth pursuing. And I'm not saying this from a moral high ground. The call is coming from inside the house. Like, on one side of the spectrum, you got these perfect it girls, but on the other side, you see a lot of young women on the internet relating deeply to these very flawed characters from fiction. And sometimes seeing yourself reflected in others can be the actual comfort and motivation you need, rather than this seemingly out of reach perfect woman. This disconnect between the dream and reality is usually what disappoints us. And I think fiction, ironically, can ground us in reality and the inherent human nature of our flaws, rather than convincing ourselves there's something uniquely wrong with us. As Enneagram Type 4, you have no idea how hard that was to say. Anyway, fiction doesn't just show the most perfect side of a character, but also the ghosts of their past and the lies that they tell themselves. And I may be biased as a writer, but no self-improvement video or book has helped me as much as fiction, whether it's sad or happy or just pure escapism, all of it. This is because fiction doesn't often tell you a message outright. It's up to you to use your intellectual abilities to discern meaning. And when you get to see these character arcs in action, whether it's a more inspirational tale or a cautionary one, it can actually show you how to do something, rather than just telling you in the more dry, straightforward, non-specific nature of self-help books. In a way, I kind of feel like these videos are trying to turn everyone into the same person rather than the best version of themselves. Part of the reason why I like personality tests so much is because it gives you a better insight on how to become a better you, rather than trying to become a better version of someone else and convincing yourself you truly desire the habits of a lifestyle you admire in digital format. But you can never truly embody it because you can't sustain those habits. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution on how to harness your strengths and deal with your weaknesses, but I think a problem underlying self-help videos is that they kind of sell it to you like there is. There's obviously general advice that would work for anyone when it comes to feeling holistically better, but I think it's important to find the exact reason why you're doing something and why the habits and journey make you happy. For me and a lot of other people, I'm sure, a long-term goal is just not powerful enough to sustain daily habits. I know this sounds quite basic, but I feel like a crucial part of self-improvement can easily be overlooked because we're always looking for the shiniest new tip or video that can change our life when we're just missing the foundations. In Walter Murch's In a Blink of an Eye, he discusses film editing techniques and theories such as the rule of six. Basically, while choosing what shot to put where, he prioritizes the things at the top of the list, like emotion and story, what more so than 3D space and 2D space. If the things at the top of the list are prioritized, the rest usually falls into place, creating this cohesive story. And as viewers, we're more forgiving of minor inconsistencies, which we often don't even notice, but we'll be very thrown up if a horror movie is edited like a comedy, even if the action does technically line up. Likewise, learning about the coolest new time management hack does nothing if you don't have a sturdy foundation and reason for doing it in the first place. The periods in my life where I worked the hardest was not because of any motivational videos, or not even because I really loved myself. The periods of my life where I worked the hardest was because of a deep intrinsic desire to do something, to do it for the process, even when I felt like my worst. When I was writing the first draft of one of my novels, my first semester of college, I was doing it because it was a story I had to tell, and it just resonated with me so much that my fantasy stories, in a way that my fantasy stories didn't. And in the last semester of high school, when grades didn't matter, I woke up at 4 a.m. every day to study for AP Bio because I just wanted to. I just wanted to learn, and I wanted to know that I could understand because I had previously branded myself as just not a STEM person. But this gave me more confidence in the fact that I can understand it. And this is after I got into college and grades didn't really matter, but I still did it. Trust me, it was not for the aesthetic. There's nothing glamorous about waking up at 4 a.m. But it didn't matter because it was for the actual lifestyle. And it was the habits I desired, not the outcome. Not just the outcome, at least. Especially when a lot of this content is very appearance focused and glow up heavy, I find some issue with younger girls, especially younger teens, watching beautiful, fully grown women who may or may not have had some sort of cosmetic enhancement and trying to force a makeover to fit into aesthetic mold when they probably haven't even grown into their features yet and figured out what they truly want. Also, not to be too salty, but being attractive and hot is not nearly as much of a mindset as self-help gurus would want you to believe, and I feel like real confidence would have the least to do with your appearance. Nor is all confidence shown in the same way of walking in and commanding a room with your dazzling looks. You can be confident because you're curious or a hardworking person, not just because you look good. I don't have a whole lot more to say about the topic of beauty here because I'd want to spare that for another video, but I think this quote by Mitski sums it up for me. I spent all my teenage years being obsessed with beauty, and I'm very resentful about it, and I'm very angry. I had so much intelligence and energy and drive, and instead of using that to study more, or instead of pursuing something or going out and learning about or changing the world, I directed all that fire inward and burnt myself up. Again, this connects back to my point about how being self-obsessed can be this double-edged sword. Focusing too much on yourself can make you overly conscious and of your shortcomings and make it seem like the end of the world. Now, I want to end this by saying I'm not blind to how these women's content can generally improve someone's life and make them happier. And if it does do that, who am I to say it's wrong? In all honesty, I feel like I could attack my arguments and have counter arguments for that, and then so on and so forth. And at some point we can bring up philosophy, and at that point this video would never end. So I feel like I just had to cap my thoughts at some point because this is something I've just been thinking about recently. And I'm not immune to being influenced occasionally. In my freshman year of high school, I started watching Ruby Ranger, who was 100% behind my original decision to drink more tea and read classics. And now I find I genuinely enjoy both of those things. So being influenced itself is not the end of the world, but I think there's value in being discerning on what does. Anyway, these are just some thoughts I had as we're entering the new year, and I'm completely open to hearing other people's opinions, and if anyone feels differently or feels like I misinterpreted something, I don't hate these kind of creators by any extent. Even in a lot of ways, I respect their dedication to make content to inspire young women to live more fully and live their best lives, but this is just a different perspective I wanted to provide on the culture cultivated around female self-help. Thank you for watching. I promise it's not a video about me hating on